The moment the door opened, time fractured into before and after. Snowlight spilled across the hallway like a confession, and standing there was a truth I had buried beneath overtime hours, unpaid bills, and the quiet dread of another year ending without forgiveness. My heart slammed so hard it felt like it might shatter the fragile calm I had rehearsed for months. I had promised myself that New Year's Eve would be silent, disciplined, and clean of hope. Instead, hope stood on my doorstep with steady eyes and a softness that dared me to breathe again. Before this story pulls you all the way in, take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that show up when we least expect them. Your support keeps stories like this alive. My name is Matthew Brooks, and this happened in a small town outside Cedar Falls, Iowa, the kind of place where the streets empty early and the cold presses close like a stern parent. I was 34, newly divorced, and trying to convince myself that solitude was the same thing as peace. I worked maintenance at a hospital, took extra shifts, and came home to an apartment that smelled like disinfectant and microwave dinners. The calendar on the wall still showed November because December felt like an accusation. Every year had ended the same way lately, with promises I couldn't keep and prayers I didn't know how to finish. The year before had taken everything familiar. My marriage to Hannah Collins had ended quietly but completely, like a house settling after a fire. We had loved each other once in a way that felt sturdy and righteous, but grief had found us early when we lost a baby at 5 months. I folded inward, convinced that strength meant silence. She needed words, hands, and courage. I gave her distance and discipline. By the time I realized my mistake, she had already learned how to survive without me. On that New Year's Eve, I had planned nothing heroic. I cleaned the apartment, made a pot of chili, and told myself I would be asleep before midnight. I didn't want fireworks or toasts or songs about fresh starts. Fresh starts hurt when you didn't believe you deserved one. The knock came just as the sun dropped low, sharp and sudden, a sound that didn't belong to my plan. I opened the door without expectation, and there she was, Hannah, framed by winter and a year of becoming someone braver than the woman I had failed. She didn't speak the words the title remembers, not in quotes or drama, but the meaning was unmistakable. She had come as a New Year's Eve surprise, not to reopen wounds but to offer something wrapped in humility and courage. Her face held the calm of someone who had done the work. There was a ring missing from her hand and a steadiness in her shoulders I hadn't given her when it mattered. She had driven through snow because she believed in endings that could be honest and beginnings that didn't lie. My reaction shocked her completely, not because I yelled or slammed the door, but because I stepped back as if the past had teeth. I had rehearsed strength as avoidance, and now it betrayed me. I felt exposed, small, and unworthy of the mercy standing inches away. I had told myself that love was something you earned by suffering correctly. Seeing her broke that lie. I didn't know how to be chosen without proving myself first, and that confusion froze me. We sat in the living room without the scaffolding of conversation, the clock ticking like a witness. I noticed the details I had missed before, the way she breathed through difficult moments, the patience she had learned without me. I wanted to apologize with perfect words, but perfect words are a myth. All I had was presence and the willingness to stop hiding. The challenge was not to persuade her of anything, but to accept that forgiveness is not a transaction. It is a gift, and gifts make proud people uncomfortable. The year had taught me how lonely discipline could be. I had measured progress in hours worked and nights endured, not in healing. I had volunteered at the church pantry, fixed neighbors' heaters, and sent checks I couldn't afford, believing that service could substitute for vulnerability. It helped, but it didn't touch the center of the ache. That night, Hannah's presence turned the lights on in rooms I had sealed off. I felt the old grief rise, not to drown me but to be acknowledged at last. She told me about her year without speeches, about therapy sessions that taught her how to name pain, about learning to sit with sorrow instead of sprinting away. She spoke of faith returning in pieces, of praying angry prayers and discovering that God didn't flinch. She hadn't come to demand anything. She came to say that the year had taught her something about grace, and she wanted to share it before the clock reset and pretended that nothing mattered. My shock softened into something like awe. I realized that the bravest thing she had done was show up without guarantees. The bravest thing I could do was stay. The struggle inside me was loud, a tug-of-war between fear and faith. I wanted to promise her a changed man overnight, but change that lasts moves slower. I chose honesty instead. I chose to admit that I was afraid of failing again and tired of pretending that self-denial was holiness. Outside, the town prepared for midnight with quiet resolve. Inside, something gentler happened. We didn't rush reconciliation. We didn't rewrite history. We allowed silence to do its work. I noticed that my breath had slowed, that my shoulders had dropped. The apartment felt warmer, not because the heater worked harder, but because hope had returned without demanding performance. When midnight came, it didn't arrive with shouting or glitter. It arrived with a sense of permission. Permission to grieve properly. Permission to forgive myself for surviving the wrong way. Permission to believe that God could weave mercy through the mess I had made. I understood then that surprises are not always meant to dazzle. Sometimes they are meant to heal. In the days that followed, we agreed on something small and holy. We would take the next step, not the next 10. We would meet for coffee, talk with counselors, pray honestly, and let trust rebuild like muscle. There were setbacks, old habits tugging at our ankles, but there was also laughter returning in shy increments. I learned to say what hurt instead of burying it. She learned that my silence had been fear, not indifference. The work was real, and so was the grace. What moved me most was the way this second chance didn't erase consequences. It transformed them. The loss we shared didn't vanish. It found a place to rest. Service stopped being penance and became gratitude. Faith stopped being an argument and became a practice. The calendar turned, but more importantly, so did we. If this story has already touched you, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stories like this survive because people choose compassion over cynicism. As the year unfolded, friends noticed the difference. They saw a man less hurried and a woman more grounded. We volunteered together at the pantry, not to be seen, but because hunger had taught us humility. We learned that miracles are rarely loud. They sound like apologies, offered without conditions, and hope accepted without suspicion. Before this ends, I have a special request. Please comment the word grace if you believe that even broken years can deliver holy surprises. On the next New Year's Eve, we stood in the same doorway, older by a year and lighter by a lifetime. We didn't call each other gifts anymore. We called each other companions. When the clock struck midnight, I felt the same snowlight on my face and understood something at last. Shock had been the doorway to surrender. Surrender had been the doorway to love. And love, when it is patient and brave, has a way of turning endings into beginnings without asking for applause. If this story moved your heart, please engage with it now. Your kindness helps these stories reach the people who need them most.